All righty, good evening. This is the Thurston County public hearing for the budget of 2019-2020 biennial. And so we're at the 6:30 portion of the agenda for December 4th, 2018. And so this is open to the public in terms of any part of the budget they might have heard either yesterday or today. And so with that, we'll turn to Robin to see if there's any final comments, and if there's anybody from the public, I'll bring them forward to the podium and address the board, and then do closing remarks and adjourn. So, have anything?
Yep. Thank you, Commissioner. So the items in the slide for this evening are the same budget overview that you saw last night. So I'll just go through them very, very quickly. Here's the total budget by type of fund, revenues and expenditures. And the thing to note about this slide is that in many cases, the revenues are not enough to cover the expenditures. We'll talk a little more about that at the end of the hearing. Here's the general fund workforce. The thing to remember about this slide is that this is only the general fund, that most of these offices have restricted funds that have additional FTEs for them. Here's the county workforce in the general fund compared to population growth. The general fund is kind of tracking with population growth, but overall, the county workforce is pretty flat where population has grown. So what that translates into is a difficulty to continue to provide services to a growing population. Here are the highlights. I'm not going to go through them. I did last night, and you heard all of these as we looked at each office and department over the last few days. I will say, though, that all of these items connect to the county's strategic plan that was developed over the course of this past year and align to the citizen priorities that we heard in the survey and the online budget tool that we had. So the board did fund the most important things in a very strategic way. Here's more highlights. This is the short list of items that are not in the preliminary budget. It's not that they're not in the budget at all, but they're not in the preliminary that was released for public review. The board will be considering these items during final deliberation in the next 2 days. And I would turn it over to you to conduct the public hearing part of this session and then have a few closing comments.
Yeah, sure. So at this juncture, this is where the portion of public testimony happens. And so I'll look into the audience and see if anybody signed in. No, nobody signed in. So I'll look at the audience to see if there's anybody from the general public that would like to come to the podium. I see no one by a show of hands. So that concludes that portion. So it's that fast. So unfortunately, and then I have some closing comments. Did you have something else?
I do have just a few remarks, and I would draw your attention back to this overarching budget slide. Just a few concerns that I have about this budget that I would like to share with you, and perhaps a plan on how to go forward. One of the striking things in this preliminary budget is the gap between the revenue and the expenditures, especially in the general fund. We rely on offices and departments to not spend their full appropriation. If they start spending everything that the board allows, we would be in trouble in the general fund. So that's just something to think about. Offices and departments have got to continue to be frugal in their spending and find ways to conserve. And once you add the COLA for this budget, that gap will be even bigger. You created, as a board, capacity in the general fund, mainly through a $4 million shift in road levy and road diversion out of the road fund. And this is simply not sustainable, as you know. So we either need to find a way to wean the general fund off those diversions and shifts, or create additional revenue in the road fund. Otherwise, we will not be able to maintain our county roads. Third, I would mention that many of the county's funds are at capacity. And by that, I mean we are spending at or above the incoming revenue and spending down fund balance. And in most of the funds, we're doing that in a strategic and purposeful way. But within the next 2 to 4 years, we're going to need to cut back on spending at a time when demand will increase. So that's something to bear in mind as we go forward with this budget. And then last, I would mention that although revenue is strong now, just amazing sales tax and property taxes coming in, and we have construction going on like crazy and very low unemployment. Even though that's good now, the economy will eventually turn. We don't know when. Economists are saying maybe now 2020, 2022, right in there. They think it's going to turn, but it will turn. And at that time, this county does not have reserves to sustain us through hard times. So I think that as we go forward, we need to think about how we're going to address when the bottom falls out of this economy. My suggestion to you that you give direction countywide to carefully monitor revenue and spending over the next 2 years. We do that as a matter of course, but I think that we need to be very diligent about that. I think we should develop a contingency plan because we don't have reserves. We need to know what we would do very quickly if the economy tanks. And I would suggest that we continue to seek out and pursue new revenue sources in the general fund and in our other funds. So with that comment, I would say overall this is a good budget and I recommend adoption when the time comes.
Okay, what is adoption date?
So next steps. Your final deliberations are on Wednesday. That's tomorrow afternoon at 1:30. If necessary, we also have a scheduled work session on Thursday morning at 9 o'clock. When you make final decisions about this budget, you'll give final guidance to staff so that we can prepare all of the necessary documents. And then adoption on Friday, December 14th at 10 a.m.
10 a.m.
Yep, 10 a.m.
So do you have any comments about the overall?
Are
or the
we
day?
about to close down then for the evening?
Yes. That's where I'm taking you.
Being we're talking about money or lack thereof, I would just like to close by letting the public know there's a couple things that I'd like to make them aware of. One of them is the gas tax. We have a hard time keeping our roads up, and when you buy a gallon of gas out there, you pay 49 cents a gallon in state tax to be shared with the counties. We get 1/4 of 1 cent on that gallon purchase that you made. And marijuana is collected in this county to this past year. The state collected $14.8 million just in Thurston County, and they reimbursed the county for the zoning, the planning, and the permitting, and the enforcement, and everything else that goes with it, $143,000. That's less than 1% of what they collected. So I'd just like the public to know that although there's a lot of money changing hands, it's not coming our way much. And I'll just let it go at that. It's always good to have the public educated as to what is going on in your government. So thank you for watching.
You have to talk about the property tax?
Well, I didn't want
All
to
these
take
other-
the whole
other
show.
things? No, I'm not gonna talk about it. I got other stuff.
Well, we can go into the 1% if you want,
Or
but
the
no.
85-15 split.
Oh, yeah, 85-15% split on the sales tax.
Well, how much do we get?
We get the 15 cents
Yeah.
on the dollar.
My question is, when you described if we don't receive back 3 to 5% revision from the various departments at the end of the year, that we're in real trouble in the general fund. How do you define real trouble? Under
Real
10
trouble?
million, or how do you define that?
So I define real trouble as not being able to meet payroll without going in the red in that fund.
Which is
And
10 million?
this budget, yes, you require a fund balance, a beginning fund balance of about $10 million. If you don't start the year with that much money in the bank, we can't meet cash flow. And the reason for that is that we spend at a fairly steady rate from month to month, but our revenue, it's property tax, it comes in two big chunks, in April and in October. So we spend down our fund balance, and by the time you hit the October property tax, we are at a low point in the year in our bank account, basically. So it's just like those couple of days before your paycheck for people who go from check to check, just before your paycheck gets deposited, your bank account's at a low point. My husband knows how that is. Our accounts, even though we have millions of dollars, government accounts work the same way. And our paycheck, if you will, comes in twice a year, but we have to spend about the same amount every month to be able to create the paychecks for our employees. So if we don't have enough at the beginning of the year, we're going to go in the red come early October. And that is a problem. I think it was in 2009, the county, in the reaction to the recession, didn't cut spending enough. The general fund went into the red, and the county had to borrow money to be able to float the general fund. You do not want to be in a position to have to borrow money to pay
we're not
your
doing that.
operating costs. That
Yeah,
would
I
be something I
agree
would
with
describe
that.
as real trouble.
Agree with that. And my other question is, or question, maybe comment, you had painted kind of an ugly picture, or gloom and doom. I'll say gloom and doom. The economists say there might be 20, 22, 21, who knows? Because nobody knows. They've been right before,
Right.
they've been wrong before.
Right?
And the economy might go in the tank. And we'll have to seek new revenue sources. And to me, that's obviously taxation. And it's never a good time from a citizen's point of view to take more money from them. But I can tell you when the worst time is.
But in a
So
recession.
we're going to have to really navigate through this very carefully,
Yes,
lest we lose a lot of support from the public and take food off of their kitchen table.
I would agree.
Yeah. But again, a Herculean job by you and all your budget staff and every department's financial people. My gosh, what a job this was. And thank you very, very much, all of you.
Yeah, these are the people you see that make it happen, are
Really
the
got it
people
done.
sitting here tonight.
Yes.
Yep.
Mr. Chair,
Yep.
could I make one more comment?
Let me ask her a question.
Oh,
maybe
okay,
shortly.
okay.
Just for the record, anybody can answer this question, just to make sure, how many people emailed in, texted in, phoned in from the general public, called in, left any kind of response to this budget process or the content thereof?
So that I'm aware of, we had one comment, and that was about the environmental health fee increase that came in writing. And then we had people that came to the hearing on revenue on that subject. But
But earlier.
But we
than-
had, as in general in the budget, no, we haven't seen any, no comment.
Was it supportive? Was it supportive, the email you received, or not supportive?
On the,
The one
Thank you.
email that I received was not in support of the environmental health fee.
Okay.
But, you got a lot of comment here in the room or in.
yeah, the other week.
Yeah.
Sure.
testimony.
Right.
I guess just to follow up on the ending fund balance, because you mentioned our inability to
That was a
maybe
good
make
question.
payroll. But also a downside from this would be the bond rating if we drop below a certain point. And unfortunately, we do have to depend on that bond rating quite often for some of the projects that we're often involved in, so.
Yes, we do. For every capital project, if at any time the county issues bonds to support capital projects, we have a new bond rating every time where there is a thorough review by either Moody's or Standard & Poor of, how are we managing our finances? And if we're not managing well, our bond rating goes down, and what that means is the cost to borrow money is more. So that is a very important issue for us to be thinking about.
I would just like to echo Commissioner Hutchings' thank you to staff for the hard work.
You bet. All righty. Any other comments from anybody? Anybody? No? All righty. Is there a motion to close the public hearing?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I move to close the public hearing.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded to close the public hearing. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye, and that motion carries. Is there a motion to adjourn the public hearing for the 2019-2020 budget?
I so move.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, and we are adjourned.